Happy friggin' Vlogmas, everyone. Merry Christmas Eve. Okay, so I've got a final list for you. A final listmas, if you will. Okay, we've done, bunches of faves things for this year to wrap it up year in review. Okay, yesterday we did Anwen's top 10 favorite books. Today we're gonna do my top 10 favorite books of 2024. Are you ready? Okay, so in the past couple of years, I'd say last year or two, no, 2 years I reckon, I've gotten quite into this sort of like horror genre, and I apologize for that because I feel like when I first started out with booktube I read like a wider range of things. So like I was like following people were following me, blah blah, just based on a very huge array. Like I would just read anything, but 2024 I feel particularly has cemented me kind of in this sort of horror genre. Not like intense horror, not like slashers or like body horror or, gross gore, things like that, or ones that are like really, really scary. Like I think I'm in this sort of like gothic horror era, or like sort of folk horror, like witches and like creepiness, not so much like, dudes in masks with knives and like scariness. Like I still can't handle that. But keeping that in mind going forward. Okay, in no particular order. First one, Diavola by Jennifer Marie Thorne. So this one's been getting a lot of hate on the booktubes, I feel, and I can understand that, but I really liked it, and I've been feeling a bit weird, like as you do when you really loved a book that everyone hated. You sort of think, what have I missed? Is there something wrong with me? But I think I know what's up, and I'm gonna start out with the criticism, okay? Like, the supporting characters in this book are not very three-dimensional, okay? They're two-dimensional, like, they're not well developed, but I feel like it's still fine because the story is about our main girl. Our main girl's the story. Everyone else is just a supporting character in her life, and like, that's fine. Okay, so it's about this girl. She's successful in her like high up job. She's really good at it, blah blah, but she's not very happy, and she's close with her family. She's got quite a big family, siblings and extended family and everything, but even though she's close with them, she has like a bit of a rocky relationship with them in that they are very heavy on the criticism for her, and particularly on her. Like, she's sort of the black sheep in the family a bit. So things go wrong on vacations in various situations, and they don't spend a lot of time looking at themselves critically. They only really focus on her part in blaming in the situation. Anyway, she goes to Italy with her family, and they stay in this villa. And it's immediately clear that there's something real fucked up about the villa, okay? Like, spoiler, it's haunted, okay? So as it goes on, as the book goes on, you find out, okay, it is haunted, why it's haunted, who it's being haunted by, okay? Bit of a history mystery, if you will. Also, how it is that they came to be in that villa, okay? Did they just happen upon that villa, or was it orchestrated? Maybe by the town, maybe by some people, I don't know. Just, thrown it out there. But also, as this horrible thing goes on in the background, the family's looking for blame. They can't look deep in themselves and go, it's a supernatural reason. It must be one of our favorite people to blame. And the family dynamic then sort of crumbles, and our poor like main girl, she becomes sort of the scapegoat for the haunted situation. I really liked it. I thought it was really good, and also the ending I really liked. Lots of people are on about like the ending being really stupid, but I disagree, okay? And I think that I don't feel bad about it. I don't feel like I've missed something, or like there's something wrong with my personal book choices. I really thought it was really interesting, and I really liked the main character. Okay, next one, Dark Harvest by Norman Partridge. So this one is sort of giving Stephen King a little bit, and for some people I feel like that's not going to be amazing, but others I think that you would enjoy it. So it's really small town, in the way that Stephen King sort of focuses on his small towns. Like, he writes a small town really well, and small town characters, like, he develops them really well. And I think this was sort of similar in Norman Partridge. It had like a sort of, I don't know, I don't know, like a cutesy sort of small town America feel, despite being a horror. Okay, it's about this town. It's like cursed. Every year around harvest time, or like Halloween-ish, they have this creature emerge from the cornfields. He's like part cornstalk body, part like jack-o'-lantern head. You know, he's like this horror figure. His job is to try to make it to the church, to survive the trek from this cornfield miles away to the church in town. And then it's the job of boys in town, so male children between the age of like 15 and 18, something like that. It's the job of these boys to stop it, to kill it before it gets to the church. But a lot of them die in the meantime, because, you know, this like crazy monster thing that's got to get to the church, it's like not, you know, taking prisoners. And you find out like a little bit more about why it is that way, about the town's curse, about the people involved, you know, and like what exactly makes the monster. Don't know, how does the monster happen? So interesting. Like, and just written really well in a way that I really enjoyed, like good, like really good wordsmithing and writing. I enjoyed it. Okay, so the next one, I'm gonna do two at once. I've got two on my list by Rachel Harrison, who I think is so banging. I love her so much. I only found her, I think maybe like the year before last, or maybe even just early last year. But she's like very quickly become one of my favorite authors. So one of them, So Thirsty, and the other one, Black Sheep. Okay, so So Thirsty is about vampires, and Black Sheep is about a cult. Oh, I love it so much. Okay, so the vampire one, So Thirsty. We'll start there. It's about these two women, okay? One who is very buttoned up and stayed and successful in her career and married to this guy who's horrible and like cheats on her and treats her like shit. But she's like, oh, it's safer and better and milder to stay with this guy and stay in this job I hate, because it's, you know, it's safer, and like, why would I take so many risks, and what's the point of taking so many risks when maybe it doesn't end up actually being any better at the end anyway, you know? And she's got this best friend who she only sees every once in a while because she's off traveling the world doing stuff. She's literally the exact opposite. She's a wild woman, okay? She's throwing risks out there all the time. Sometimes they really work out for her, sometimes they really fucking don't. Like, it's, you know, is her situation better because she's complete opposite? Maybe not, okay? But she and so these two friends, they go away to this like retreat type thing or whatever, and the one who wants to stay buttoned up and not do anything bad, she's fighting the wild one because the wild one keeps like signing them up for crazy stuff. She's like, we should go hang out with these foreign dudes, you know, and the buttoned up one is like, feel like that's a bad idea, and the wild one's like, no, we're definitely doing it. So they end up hanging out with these guys who, like, spoiler alert, just minorly, okay, they're vampires. They end up with these vampires and some bad shit goes down, and the wild one's like, I'm so sorry. Spends the rest of the book sort of just like being, you know, like, I'm like, what do you want me to do? Okay, it's fucking happened, it was my fault, I'm fucking sorry, you know. And the buttoned up one is like trying to, like, you know, throw water on this fire, but also just like emerging into a completely different life that she had no, you know, she didn't want to be in that life. She didn't want to jump out of her like cozy little half shitty life, you know, onto this sort of fire that, you know, may be better but probably isn't. And it's just basically like, the vampires are there and they're interesting and they're kind of funny, you know, and they're cool, but they're not the main characters of this vampire book. The main characters are these like two women who just like accidentally emerged into this whole new life that they weren't ready for, and sort of like them being besties and navigating this new life together. Do you know what I mean? So it's basically just a book about women in their 30s, you know, living their fucking life, even though it's about vampires as well. Which I love that about Rachel Harrison. Like, her books, they're just about normal women doing normal women stuff with like paranormal shit in the background. Do you know what I mean? So then another one, the other one, she wrote this on my list, Black Sheep, is about a cult. Okay, so you've got this woman, she is wasting all of her talents in this like backwater place, being like a waiter or whatever, and she doesn't have any friends and no one likes her, and she doesn't get close to people. Like, she sort of like pushes people away, you know, first of all, but also people tend to just have this sort of feeling about her that they don't want to get close to her. She has like this natural sort of like uncanny vibe that like pushes people away, you know, maybe like some sort of predator or something, I don't know. So she gets invited home to the wedding of her friends, and we find out that she abandoned her home. She left home. She ran away about 5 years ago. She's been living on her own, completely outside of anything, knowing nobody, because she grew up in a cult. Okay, and you sort of get a vibe, first of all, that it's like a sort of really intensely Christian, like evangelical, sort of fundamentalist Christian cult. But then as things sort of like go on, you find out actually it's a satanic cult. They just act like that, exactly sort of like that. Okay, and sort of she goes home, and you find out her relationship with her mother is really absolutely the shittest. Like, her mom's like an old school scream queen. Like, she used to be in horror movies, like pretty and like well loved and everything. And now she's just like the wife of this like big honcho guy in the cult. But the guy left ages ago when their kid, this girl, our main girl, was like 11 years old. He just abandoned the cult. But he was like this big head honcho sort of dude. Everyone was like, oh, he's the big cheese in the cult, but now he's gone. So our girl, she goes home. She has a terrible time with her mother, terrible time with everyone around, and starts to like, you sort of like meet everyone and like their relationship and everything. And the relationship's really weird. And I'm not going to like spoil it for you, okay? Because I feel like a lot of like what makes the book really good comes out in revelations later, okay? But I think you can probably guess what's up with the girl. You know, it's a satanic cult, and she's the daughter of the big cheese. Like, I'm just gonna lay that out there. Anyway, loved it. Love that shit. Okay, next one is The Thin Man, okay, by Dashiell Hammett. I've never read anything else by Dashiell Hammett, but I feel like I should do. I think he wrote Maltese Falcon, something like that, in the 20s. Do you know what I mean? Or the 30s, something like that. Okay, anyway. So Thin Man is like really stereotypical sort of like PI investigator shit. But only because it was one of the first ones. You know, it's not stereotypical if it's the one that caused all the other stereotypes to happen. Do you know what I mean? But you've got this guy and his wife. So the wife is rich, and the guy is just a retired PI. And they are the cutest couple together. Like, they're both super clever. They're both into wisecracking and like bants with each other, but like, you know, 20s bants. They're both like really down to earth and like calm in stressful situations. Do you know what I mean? But they end up having to solve this murder that they didn't want to solve. Like, this guy, he's retired PI. Like, he doesn't want to be solving murders, but they like end up in this situation like on vacation. They're like, shit, okay, we gotta come to the bottom of this. And it's just basically them solving this shit in the 20s, just with like dance, cleverness, wisecracks. I love it. It was so good. And I wish that I knew them in real life. Like, if they were real people, like their romance and their just general awesomeness, like I would want to be friends with them and go to their dinner parties, and that's what I would live for. Okay, next one has a similar vibe, like a sort of like 30s noir PI sort of vibe, but it doesn't take place in the 30s, it takes place now. Okay, so this one is Trouble Is What I Do by Walter Mosley, and it's part of a series. It's number 6 in the series, and I didn't know that. I just sort of like randomly found it in the library and thought, oh, this looks really good, and I really enjoyed it. And I didn't even realize it was part of a series until Ollie from Ollie, you know, on BookTube. He said to me, he was like, oh, I love this series, it's one of my faves. I was like, shit, I didn't even know there was a series, but I've now put number 1 in the series on my list to read soon. But you can read them out of order. I read this 6th one and it was fine. Like, I had no idea that was part of a series. Anyway, you've got McGill. He's a PI in New York City, and like the vibes, so noir, like black and white, like shadows, like people lurking, you know, like the sort of discussions between them are very like 30s, like PI sort of like, you know, listen here, mister, you know, like this sort of thing. But Miguel, this PI guy, comes to him. He's a Mississippi blues man, comes to him and says, I got a job for you. Can you help me out? He needs to get a letter to a rich white woman who's about to get married, and he needs to get the letter to her before she gets married. But loads of things are keeping that from happening. You can't just walk in and give the letter, because this particular letter has information which her family and people around her don't want her to have. And it's that she's related to this black Mississippi blues man. So his wife, or like the bride's grandmother or great grandmother, something like that, wanted her grandkids to know that you know, they're not just like these white people. They have, you know, black people in their ancestry. Their family is part black, you know, and she wants them to know that and to be proud of that. Do you know what I mean? So he's got to get this information to this woman, and that's the story. But I mean, like, I think the main reason I love it is just the vibes. It's just the old school like dialogue and sort of like general noir feel of it. I liked the ending. It's really good. Okay, next one. You Look Better as a Ghost by Joanna Wallace. So this one I didn't think was going to be good. It was on, had it as a library hold, and the library hold lapsed, and then I got it again, and it lapsed again. Like, I just sort of wasn't into reading it, but I'm so glad that I did because it was super good. So it's about a serial killer. I think this is why I didn't want to read it, because again, like, I'm not really into like slasher type horror. I'm only into, you know, like folk horror and sort of creepy stuff like that. But she's a serial killer, but she's not like a, you know, as like a slasher sort of serial killer type. She's like a very meticulous sort of like serial killer. She picks her victims very carefully, you know, and studies them for months, you know, so that she's not going to get caught, and she can, like, you know, take part in their murders fully and have the full experience without being stressed, you know. So her dad has just died, and he died in a care home, and she found out that he wasn't very well treated in the care home, and that's led to one of the people she's decided to murder. But also very recently she got a sort of dismissal. She's trying to get her art career up and going as well. In the sort of wake of her dad's death, she's sort of trying to move on and move forward and like get her art career going. She was dismissed quite bluntly by a guy who said that her art can't be in some show that she's applied for. So she sort of followed him and killed him, and then she's found out that he is related to other things. So all these sort of people tie up. But also, while her last one, she's been getting a bit sort of lazy. She's been getting really emotional, do you know what I mean? And sort of like messing up a couple things. And somebody sees her and she doesn't realize, and watches her, and has been watching her carefully because she wants something from this serial killer. She wants the serial killer to do something for her, to sort of pair up with her and do stuff. But now the serial killer's like having a problem. She's like, shit, this person is like an element I didn't reckon on, and she's gonna get me in trouble. She's gonna get me caught. So what should I do about it? So good. Really enjoyed it. Okay, next one is The Body by Stephen King. I love Stephen King. I think he's one of my favourite authors, okay? And I've read loads of his books this year, but I think this is the only one of his that's made it into my top 10 for some reason. Okay, but it's a novella, originally published, I think, as just one massive book with 3 other novellas in it, called like Different Seasons or something like that. Anyway, I prefer it as little novellas because I prefer to feel like I've read more than one book at a whack. But this one inspired the movie in the 80s. What's it called? Stand By Me? Something like that, where the kids like try to find the body in the woods. Okay. Anyway, so Stephen King, he writes so well. I love his writing so much, especially when he's writing about a small town, or like just a small town in the 60s in particular, like 1960s small town America and small town American characters. He writes them so fucking well. Like their dialogue, like the characters are always like super well developed, multifaceted. Like his descriptions of just sort of towns in general and like the social sort of stuff going on. Brilliant. Anyway, it's these kids in the 60s. They hear there's a dead body in the woods and they want to go see it, and they've got to trek like a full day, you know, and camp in the woods and tell their parents that they're sleeping over at each other's houses so that they can go and see this dead body before anyone else finds it or like takes it away or whatever, before the police get to it or anything. And it's just like, it's not horror really. Like, I know it's about a dead body, and there is like a minor shootout at the end ish, and that's not a spoiler, like, or is it? I feel like it's not, because it doesn't say who's involved or what happens. But it's mainly not horror at all. It's mainly just like a sort of coming of age loveliness. I mean, it does have spicy language. Like, if you're triggered by like spicy language, I feel like don't read it. Like, that's Stephen King sort of gets really authentic in that 60s small town American dialogue. so keep that in mind. But other than that, lovely, so lovely. Okay, Mermaid of Black Conch by, oh, what was it? Monique Roffey. So this one I read for Book Naturalist Book Club. Heidi and Doris, they do this Book Naturalist Book Club. I fell off the wagon a bit with it this year around the summer, sort of like a little bit after I read this one, I think, even though I loved this one. But I'm going to try to do it again in 2025. It's a whole nother list. It's a whole nother chance to do good and not fuck it up. But it's, even though on the list a lot of them are non-fiction, this was one of the fiction ones, and it's about this mermaid in the Caribbean in the 1970s. So this random guy, he's a fisherman, he accidentally reels in this mermaid, and then to sort of keep her safe and away from these like dickhead American guys who like want to sort of like parade her around and like get money off her and like just do horrible stuff, he's got to sort of like bring her into his house and teach her to be human again. Like she's like in his bathtub and like her tail is rotting away and she's like growing her legs back and stuff like that, because turns out she was originally a woman, and the reason she was a mermaid is because she was cursed by these jealous women like ages ago, centuries ago. They didn't like how beautiful she was and how she spoke to the men in their lives, so they cursed her. And like this whole book, I guess in general, is sort of like telling people, you know, it's dangerous to be a woman. You know, like you gotta do your best in this life because it's dangerous. But it was super interesting, like her, you know, her life centuries ago, learning about sort of the original people that were on these Caribbean islands, you know, and sort of their cultures and stuff like that. Sent me down a bit of a rabbit hole actually, and I really enjoyed that. But also this woman, just like her story, like sort of victim of these horrible women, and her sort of trying to learn to be a woman again after centuries of just like the loneliness of the open ocean, you know. And the people in the village, in her sort of new chance at being a human, are also like quite horrible, some of them, you know. Some of them are lovely and some of them are horrible. And I think it's also about sort of this Caribbean village as well. Sort of this mermaid shines a light on it, and sort of like reveals imperfections in the village that maybe the people of the village don't want to see, you know. Anyway, it's also like a bit of a romance, which I really enjoyed, like between the mermaid and the fisherman that finds her. I don't think that's a spoiler. I think that's okay. Okay, last one is like a quickly added one, or sort of like a newly added one. I originally had a different one in this place because I made this before I read this book and I just read it. It's All the Beauty in the World by Patrick Bringley. This is non-fiction, it's a memoir about this guy who was a guard at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. So he was doing something else, something really intense in his career, and he decided he just wanted something that didn't require any qualifications or anything at all. He wanted to sort of just temporarily change tack. So he applied to be one of the guards at the Met. The guards, like, they're these people who, like, you know, tell you not to get so close. You know, also like be like, please, you know, watch your bag, blah, blah, blah. Please don't touch that. But also they know like a bit about stuff, so if you ask them about a painting, they can sort of like give you like rough information about it and like their thoughts and stuff like that. So I feel like I would love to be like a guide at like a museum or something like that. Like I think the people who do this at Cardiff, at the museum in Cardiff, the National Museum in Cardiff, they're volunteers, they don't get paid, or else like I would try to do that job because I feel like it'd be really good. But it's just basically a memoir of how he got that job and how he stayed in that job for 10 whole years, even though he meant for it to be temporary, because he just, you know, loved it so much. Like the social aspect of it, like the lovely people he met there, and also just primarily like the thoughts he had and the things he thought of and the things he learned in the silence and in the boredom. Like when it's your job to just sort of stand and look at paintings and look at people without your phone, without a book, without anything, for whole days at a time, it just sort of makes you very observant and intuitive and like sets your mind on fire, you know, all these sort of beautiful things that he was thinking. I just, oh my god, I love it. I loved it so much. Like I would be bored as shit, I think, but like him, I would learn to not be bored. Like my mind would learn to take things in instead of being bored. Anyway, I thought that was beautiful. Okay, that's it. That's the top 10. That's the top 10 books of 2024. I have to go buy stocking stuffers now at the range. I've been parked here a while and people have been looking at me like, my God, this parking lot is bouncing for there not actually being a lot of cars in it. Tomorrow is Christmas Eve and the last day of Vlogmas. I think we're gonna go to Winter Wonderland, like the fair, the Christmas fair in town. And we can talk about New Year's resolutions. If you have any and you'd like to share them with me before I say about that, that would be delightful. But also, I feel like I've come to a bit of a place in relation to BookTube about maybe I should change my status BookTube-wise, and I feel like we should also talk about that if you have thoughts. Also, obviously, I want to know what your top 10 books are. Lay them on me, my dudes. All of them, okay? I feel like I 100% need these lists. I want to live my life through everyone's favorite lists, just in 2025 in general. As usual, any questions, comments, concerns, please let me know. And I'll see you tomorrow for Christmas Eve Vlogmas.